July 20th, 1833, and the seething mob of more than 400 Missourians officially declare that no more Saints would be allowed into Jackson County. Escalating quickly, they enact an expulsion order for the Saints already living there to leave the county and begin attacking them and destroying their property to expedite the process. Meanwhile, Saints in Kirtland are also facing persecution led primarily by Dr. Philastus Hurlbut, a former church member who'd been excommunicated for adultery. Spreading vicious lies and exaggerated stories about Joseph, he eventually threatens to kill the prophet. Now, living over 800 miles away from Zion, the prophet didn't yet know about the expulsion order or how bad things have gotten in Missouri. I mean, all they had back then was snail mail. But through Joseph, the Lord provides some comfort by saying, "Unto you, my friends, fear not. Let your hearts be comforted. Yea, rejoice evermore, and in everything give thanks." He then promises that their prayers are being heard and that all things shall work together for their good. Wait, rejoice and give thanks in the midst of persecution? Ooh, that ain't easy, especially as the Missouri Saints are forced to flee across the river into Clay County in the middle of winter and live in tents. What are they supposed to do? Why was this persecution happening? After all, this was Zion. Unfortunately, Joseph didn't quite know how to answer their pleas either. Besides the counsel to rejoice and give thanks in all things, the only answer he kept getting to his prayers was to be still and know that I am God, which didn't seem to answer a lot of their questions. But sometimes that's all the answer we get. You know, typically, the Lord doesn't reveal the whole picture, and like these suffering saints, we're often only given life's puzzle pieces one at a time, and usually without the picture on the box to even know exactly what we're piecing together. Well, for days, Joseph continued to plead for answers about why church members were being expelled from Jackson County and what would happen to Zion. Finally, one evening, the revelation came to Joseph and Oliver Cowdery. During breakfast the following morning, Martin Harris and Brother Ames stopped by and were greeted by Oliver, who said, "Good morning, brethren. We have just received news from heaven." Hallelujah! Finally, some answers and insight. But it wasn't all good news. The Lord indicated that the saints needed to be chastened and tried because of their contentions, envying, strife, and lustful and covetous desires. Plus, they were slow to hearken to the voice of the Lord. Gratefully, however, the Lord also promised that Zion shall not be moved out of her place, and all they who have mourned shall be comforted. So, fear not. Okay, regardless of the plethora of questions we might have, take comfort that the Lord promises that He'll reveal all things when He comes again. In other words, that 10,000-piece puzzle we're trying to put together with only a few hundred pieces will one day have all the pieces, and we'll see the whole picture. And sure, we'll have to go through some very hard things, but no matter what's going on in our lives, God is the master builder, and He is aware of you and loves you. Now, the Lord also advises the saints to use the available legal channels to solve their problems and save their homes. And that's why He had established the constitution of this land by the hands of wise men whom I have raised up for this very purpose. So they petitioned local leaders, the governor, and even the President of the United States. Joseph Smith himself traveled to the White House, knocked on the door, and asked to meet with President Martin Van Buren. And while they had a nice conversation, the president wasn't willing to help because he felt Missouri state leaders should solve the problem instead, and honestly, wasn't thrilled about taking the cause of the Mormons in an election year. By the way, he lost the election. Finally, despite these terrible, horrible, no good, very bad days of the persecution, one reason for the saints to rejoice and give thanks was that the work did continue to move forward. In October, a church member named Freeman Nickerson visited the prophet and asked if Joseph himself would teach the gospel to Freeman's family in New York and Canada. And even though he was dealing with all of the persecutions, Joseph felt prompted that good things would come from this mission. Traveling with Sidney and Freeman, they preached wherever they could along the way. However, by the time they arrived at the Nickerson home in New York, Joseph and Sidney were feeling very anxious about their families and the ongoing persecutions. But while they couldn't call or text to see how everyone was doing, the Lord comforted them with the revelation found in section 100. He calmed their fears and reminded them how important their missionary work was. And verses 5 and 6 contain the great missionary promise that if we'll lift up our voices to share the gospel, the Lord will help us know what to say, and then we're to speak the thoughts that I shall pour into your hearts. Comforted, they then continued north to Ontario, Canada, where they taught and baptized a large group of people and organized a flourishing branch of the church. Later, when Parley P. Pratt visited this branch, he taught and baptized John Taylor. Yes, that guy who'd not only become an incredibly successful missionary in Great Britain, but also became the third president of the church. Next time, the Lord counsels Joseph to gather up the Lord's warriors and go to Missouri to redeem the land in what will be known as Zion's Camp.